So we've been seeing some really, really dystopian images coming out of Gaza. These images, thousands of people being marched from northern Gaza to another part of Gaza. And this is only 1 week after the Biden administration. If you remember, we covered this last week. They sent Israel a letter. It was Blinken and Lloyd Austin saying, stop this. You cannot do this. What Israel dubbed the surrender or starve plan, which was essentially, it had leaked that they had a plan where they were not going to allow any aid whatsoever into northern Gaza, no food, no water, no aid, nothing, and that they were going to label anybody and everybody who was left in northern Gaza an enemy combatant. They didn't care if it was an old lady in a wheelchair who couldn't get down to wherever they wanted to evacuate to, or somebody who's just defiant and thinks there's nowhere to go, there's nowhere safe, you guys are bombing everywhere. They didn't care who the person was. It could be a 2-year-old child to an elderly 90-year-old grandma. They don't care. They're saying anybody and everybody left in the north is an enemy combatant and will be treated as such. And they're essentially going to have to either surrender and move, or they're going to have to starve. So our administration, the Biden administration, sends Israel a letter and says, no, can't do that plan. And you also need to drastically increase humanitarian aid into northern Gaza, or you risk being cut off from American weapons in 30 days, conveniently after the election. And 30 days from now, a lot can happen. And what did we see immediately? What we're seeing now are these images of these people, these death marches of these people being gathered up and having to be moved to another part of Israel. So Israel's not listening. They're not caring. They don't care about the U.S.'s threats because they know they're probably empty threats. The U.S. will continue funding Israel and giving Israel anything and everything that they want. So the question then is, why are they doing this? Why are they clearing northern Gaza? Now, those who defend Israel and everything they do say, well, it's because of security reasons. They're trying to root out Hamas. This is part of their plan to secure Israel. But there's actually something more sinister going on here that now reports are coming out. Look at this story. This is from Times of Israel. It turns out that lawmakers from Benjamin Netanyahu's Likud party have a conference that they've put together where 10 out of the 32 parliament members, I mean, these are high-level members of government. These are not just random people, that are kind of wacko in Israeli society that get together and want to have a conference. No. These are actual politicians that are in power, that are in the party that is in power, Benjamin Netanyahu's party. And they've got a conference going on called Preparing to Resettle Gaza. That's the name of the conference. 10 out of 32 of the Knesset members have attended this conference, Preparing to Resettle Gaza. So this has been the plan all along. Many of us have been saying this for over a year, that this is the plan all along, to clear Gaza and to take the land, that this wasn't about security. This is about taking the land. And now these conferences are together and they're blatantly out there just saying, we plan to resettle. And the wording that is coming from some of the people that attend these conferences, Sky News did a report on this, interestingly, because Sky News has always been, they've been fairly favoring Israel in a lot of their coverage. And they've gotten some quotes from some of the people who attended this conference. Listen to some of these quotes. One person said, when asked, why are you interested in settling Gaza? Why are you interested in moving there and starting a settlement and taking that land? This person says, because it's our homeland. It says in the Torah that this is our home, this is our land, and we have every right to live there. Another person said, we should kill them, every last one of them. And if the government won't do that, then we should just kick them out. This is our land and we deserve it. Other people saying, it would be my privilege to live there, which is a very strange thing to say, considering the whole premise of why they're clearing northern Gaza is to create more of a buffer to keep Israelis safe because of what happened on October 7th. So right outside of the wall, all these Palestinians finally got out of their concentration camp called Gaza. They broke out of there, and we saw the aftermath of that, where people that were living or nearby that border were not safe. Yet now they think it's a good idea to actually move into Gaza. They're going to consolidate all these Palestinians to another part of Gaza. And now all of these people want to move in because for safety reasons. I mean, is this making sense to anybody at all? So they're being blatant. They're openly admitting exactly what their goal is. These are high-level members of government. These are not just fringe people in Israeli society. And now the reports are getting worse. This report came out from Dan Cohen from Uncaptured Media, wrote this story. U.S. authorizes CIA mercenaries to run biometric concentration camps in Gaza's Strip. So they're going to start concentration camps. They're going to put everybody in these concentration camps. Gaza was already small enough. Now it's going to get smaller, and they're going to have these biometric surveilled concentration camps. We actually have Dan Cohen with us tonight here on the show. Dan, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it. What in the tell us about these concentration camps that they're going to be. What's going on? This is crazy.
Well, this is basically the U.S. government's solution for what to do with the Palestinian population in the Gaza Strip, where the majority of Israelis, as you just described at this conference, for example, want a full ethnic cleansing of Gaza. The countries around the world, Egypt, for example, don't want to go along with that because that will destabilize their own countries. So it seems like the compromise that the Biden administration, and when I say Biden administration, obviously Biden is not there. Kamala has no idea what's going on. So the person who's running the Biden administration's foreign policy is Jake Sullivan, the White House national security chief, he's basically our president when it comes to foreign policy right now. This is he has approved this plan, and this has been in the works since the spring, I think back as far as February. And the idea is to take basically what they want to do is turn all of Gaza into a series of little cantons of small concentration camps where individual neighborhoods or villages are basically, people are concentrated inside them. The residents of those neighborhoods who have been ethnically cleansed would be allowed to return. They stay in these areas, which the Israeli military would sterilize, meaning get rid of all armed resistance. And then the people who live in there would be surrounded by walls. They would erect walls around them, and the only way they could enter or exit these little concentration camps would be with biometric identification, whether that's they don't specify what exactly that means, whether that's pupils or retinas or fingerprints or something else. And then only those who submit their biometric data and are approved would be eligible to receive so-called humanitarian aid, meaning what you need
Food
to live,
and water.
food, water,
Right.
medicine, whatever.
Oh my gosh.
And then
Who
people
thinks
inside
this is a good idea? I mean, this is
apparently
just so,
Jake Sullivan does. Yeah.
And Israel, right? I mean, they're saying, yeah, this is. So that's been the big question. The big question that Israel has not been able to answer, and the question that everybody keeps asking is, okay, so what happens after this? Like, what are you going to do after the war? What is your plan? The plan that many people in the U.S. administration at least claimed they had was for Gaza to go back to the Palestinians. They just didn't want Hamas to run the place, right? That's always been kind of the idea, was maybe the PLO from the West Bank would join back together, and there would be, the PLO running it, some other organization other than Hamas, right? But the idea that many had was, and what Israel was saying in the beginning, when all of us were accusing them of ethnic cleansing the land and wanting to take the land, was no. They would say, no. We just don't want Hamas running the place. Hamas just cannot be allowed to run the place. But now that we're over a year into the war, and now what we're finding out is what their real plan is for all of these Palestinian people, that they're not going to give them back Gaza. You're saying that they're going to turn this into like a mini West Bank, is what it sounds like, where there's little enclaves and you got to go through checkpoints and military. The West Bank is like Swiss cheese, where the majority of it is run by Israel and controlled by Israel. And then there's these little Palestinian enclaves, and the Palestinians, in order to get from one enclave to another, have to go through checkpoints, and it's not run by. So you're saying they want to take that tiny little strip of Gaza and basically do something similar, but even worse to it. Precisely.
You are exactly right, Kim. A few things. Let me lay this out. I mean, when when they say they want to get rid of Hamas, this is exactly how they're going to do it. One of the challenges they've had is because Hamas is deeply rooted in Palestinian society in Gaza. It has continued to govern and basically be in charge of distribution of humanitarian aid that has come in. So the whole idea of the World Central Kitchen, the humanitarian aid pier that the Pentagon rolled out and then threw away once the kind of, a couple waves and some wind blew it off. That was the idea there, is to get rid of Hamas. That didn't really work, is to basically supplant them. So then some international body or Israel could be in control of distributing humanitarian aid, and then Hamas would be basically obsolete because it doesn't have any use. It's only a resistance organization, and the Israelis believe they can defeat it militarily, even though to this point they've still failed. I mean, just a few days ago, we saw the highest ranking Israeli officer to be killed in the entirety of the war that just happened. A colonel was killed in northern Gaza, where they want to do this, in Jabalia refugee camp. So that's the kind of goal, is to just get rid of Hamas, and this is their plan to do it. The guy who is running this, who is behind this, it's a privatized thing. So his name is Mordecai Kahana, goes by Moti Kahana. You can Google him. He was very involved in the dirty war on Syria, the failed regime change war on Syria. He was very close with the CIA-backed Free Syrian Army, which he eventually, in 2019, when they invaded Kurdish areas and slaughtered their way through, he turned on them. He got mad about that because of Israel's support and the U.S. support for Kurds. But this guy has basically assembled a team of 1,000 CIA-trained mercenaries from the United States, from Britain, from France, and also Kurds themselves. And I read a Jerusalem Post report today that he says the key thing about all these mercenaries, aside from their CIA training, is one, that they love war, that they're addicted to war, and two, that none of them are Jewish. So then nobody can claim, the Jews are oppressing the Palestinians, which of course Jews and Zionists are not the same thing, but this is, Israel. He's trying to say, oh, because they're not Jewish, then Israel's not doing it.
Even though Israel's hiring them, right? This is all Israel's plan. So you bring in some other henchmen. Who cares? You're still ultimately the one in charge of all those henchmen.
That's how incredibly stupid this whole thing is. But they want to basically bring in these CIA mercenaries to basically surround these camps and run this whole biometric operation. They would do crowd control. So if the people get unruly, they shoot at them with rubber bullets, they fire in the air. And if there's any actual armed resistance or anything like that, then he uses a euphemism. They bring in the second team. So it sounds like they would just kill them at that point, which is guaranteed to happen. People are not going to willingly go along with this. So this is the plan that they have, and it hasn't. So apparently, this is what I've just been researching in the last couple hours. It hasn't been approved by the Israeli parliament yet, the Israeli Knesset. And they've basically deferred to the military, and portions of the military are in favor of it because basically they know that they can't really win in Gaza. They've basically been in quicksand for the last year, and they're just losing men and not really accomplishing anything except for destroying huge portions of Gaza and making it unlivable. So that's essentially what's going on here.
I mean, do they just listen to themselves? It's like one of those things where, do you just not hear yourself with these plans and realize that you're creating concentration camps, ghettos, and surrounding? It's unbelievable that they can say these plans out loud. They can make these plans and not realize how much this is like the Holocaust. Like, how is that lost on them? I don't understand it. I don't understand how anybody could go along with this.
Well, basically what the Israeli education system and society teaches children from people from the time they're children is that Palestinians are modern day Nazis. They're reincarnations of Nazis. So you, an Israeli teenager going into the Israeli army, you're actually like someone in a concentration camp in, you know, Nazi occupied Poland, and the only way that you're going to survive is by joining the army and fighting for the state of Israel and killing everyone around you. So all of those little babies that you, Kim, and me and everyone else watching are sad about seeing their deaths, and it's heartbreaking and infuriating. The Israelis are convinced that those are actually just modern day Nazis, and when those babies grow up, they're going to be Hitlers, and so then it's actually a righteous. They're going and killing baby Hitler,
Right.
is, you know, the meme from a few years ago. So that's the level of indoctrination and inculcating this kind of genocidal ideology that we just have to kill everyone, and everyone is an enemy, and they all want to kill us, so we have to
Yeah.
kill them.
Well, I even hear that. I mean, I hear that even just here in LA. You know, I mean, I've got a lot of Jewish neighbors and friends, and I hear that even from them. You know, I hear them saying, "Well, we must do something about these Palestinians. They're trying to kill us." I mean, that's the justification, right? It's they're trying to kill us. They're trying to eradicate Jews. They're trying to enact another Holocaust, even though it's so obvious. Now, you know, and that's by no means all of my Jewish friends or neighbors. I hear a big division between them in their viewpoints on this. Like many of them are saying it's horrific what we're watching, all these innocent people being killed. Like many are saying that, but then there's still that group that's got that indoctrination of no, 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 you don't understand. They're trying to kill us. That's why we must kill their babies. I mean, it's gosh, you know, but I mean, look, we're all human. Yeah, I always try to put myself in the other person's shoes, right? I mean, we're all human. I think we can all be indoctrinated by fear. I mean, we've seen it in a variety of different ways, not just this instance, but in other aspects, other parts of our lives where we're told, you know, I mean, that's how they've gotten us into a lot of wars. That's how they get us to comply with 9/11, you know, with Patriot Act stuff. They get us to comply with COVID stuff, like anything and everything, right? It's all based on this fear. And if you really genuinely are believing that your life is in danger, I mean, people will go to extremes to protect their lives. I mean, that's what the Palestinians are doing, right? I mean, they're going to extremes to protect their lives. They're picking up arms, they're resisting, they're willing to break out, commit atrocities against the Jewish people on the other side of the wall, right? Because they feel justified in that. And we're hearing these Israelis feeling justified in now rounding all these people up and putting them in concentration camps. The problem is, how does one determine who is justified? How does one determine they are really the one in the wrong and the other one, you know, that they're in the wrong and the other's in the right? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, how does the Palestinian know they're actually the ones who have the upper hand or the right in armed resistance? And actually, the Israelis don't have that right, but they think they do. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, when you can get to somebody's mind and their heart, and you can really, truly instill that fear in them, you can get them to clearly, very clearly commit massive atrocities.
Yeah, absolutely. You can, you know, get people to think up is down and left is right, and, you know, day is night, and everything else. It's just the power of propaganda. I mean, it's all about lies, and detachment from reality is really what I think Zionism in many ways is about. There's a big lie that the state of Israel and its supporters do not want to confront. And the fact is that Palestinians are the indigenous people. That doesn't mean that every Israeli, therefore, has to leave the country and go to Europe or wherever it may be, because there now is an Israeli nationality that has been
Mm-hmm.
created as a result of Zionism. But as long as Israel decides we are going to maintain national racial supremacy, it's going to breed violent resistance. And that's precisely what we saw, not only on October 7th, but going back to even before the establishment of the state of Israel. And so Israel has been in a permanent war ever since, that it is trying to finish now, but that's really leading to its undoing. One more thing I forgot to mention before, Kim, is, when you brought up this aspect of they're doing in Gaza now, this whole concentration camp plan is in Gaza is what they've done in the West Bank. You're exactly right. And actually, back in November of 2023, not long after October 7th, I published an article in which I found the Department of Defense's highest journal, its most prestigious, important, and influential journal, had published an analysis by a guy named Omer Dostri. And Omer Dostri is a Likudnik think tanker, very hawkish, and he has since been appointed as Benjamin Netanyahu's spokesman. So this is a relatively influential guy in an important think tank in Israel, and his paper was prescient. It called for, and again, this is published in the U.S. military's highest journal. It called for not only the complete destruction of Lebanon, but it laid out basically 4 different scenarios for Gaza. One of them being, in basically where are we going with Gaza? And this is before the ground invasion. One of them being a complete Israeli occupation of Gaza, and that was his preferred goal, method. Another was to install the Palestinian Authority as like a collaborator regime, which is what rules the West Bank, as you described, rules the Palestinian areas of the West Bank as a subcontractor for the Israeli occupation and is kept afloat by European, American, and Israeli dollars. And also another option was to have a non-Palestinian Authority collaborator regime. And so they basically laid out these different options, and in that non-Palestinian Authority collaborator regime, this idea of making of expanding what they call the buffer zone, which is like a kill zone in Gaza, and this has been existing. This has existed for years and years since the siege was put on Gaza, where anybody who walks within several hundred meters of the it's not actually a border, it's an armistice line, but the edge of Gaza, what separates Gaza from Israel, would be shot. That area would be expanded. And so that's why we've seen all this bulldozing and destruction of huge amounts of Gaza, is to create these little hamlets, these little cantons. And then they would appoint like a local leader, just, from some family that's not affiliated with Hamas. They would appoint some sheikh that they like as the leader of these things that would just do Israel's bidding. So this specific plan goes back to the spring, as far as I can tell, February. But the debate of what exactly to do, and a proposal similar to this, that appeared as early as November, and I reported that back then.
Yeah. How many of these do you think they'll make? Do you know what the plan is? Like, how many of these little concentration camps inside of Gaza they plan to shove all these Palestinians into?
Well, so if they get approval from the Israeli government, which from what I can tell, they still don't have total approval, they will first do it in a neighborhood in the northwest of Gaza, to the west of Jabalia, which is, where the majority of this genocide is taking place right now, in a neighborhood called Al-Tatra. And that's the pilot, that's the test case. So if they are able to succeed, get people to go inside there, surround them with the walls, control the aid through this biometric regime, then they want to do it throughout the entire Gaza Strip, to take whatever remaining population and enclose them in these camps. They want to do it throughout the entire Gaza Strip. So how many of those? I have no idea. How big will they be? It's totally unclear. And to me, the main factor that they don't really address is they have not significantly degraded, let alone defeated, the armed resistance in Gaza. I mean, it's not even as if it's devolved into an insurgency or some kind of, total like guerrilla warfare insurgency where there's different cells that are totally independent of each other. There's a national military operating where throughout this massive complex of tunnels throughout Gaza, you have someone with battle plans, who was on a closed telephone line delivering instructions to his men in a different part of the Gaza Strip and watching on camera as these things happen. Hamas has continued to release these videos. So I don't know how exactly they plan to implement this, especially on a large scale, when the armed resistance is still very capable, and it continues to make weapons internally using munitions that it gets that are duds from Israel that didn't explode. So it's not as if it's just going to suffocate the armed resistance and that's it. It occupies the Philadelphia corridor in the south and that's it. It's like the resistance is ongoing, and it has basically an almost unlimited supply of young people who have no option other than to fight for their life.
Well, yeah, what other option are they leaving them? I mean, now they're talking about sticking them in even smaller concentration camps. No one would live like this. Nobody is going to want to rise. And that's the thing. It's so offensive to me. I'm sure it's offensive to you even more so that, whenever you go on social media and you hear all these people say, we're not the Jews of the past, we actually fight back. And it's like, what did you think a lot of those Jews were doing in the Holocaust, during the Holocaust and in the concentration? They fought back. They fought back. They just got crushed by Germany. But there were so many that tried, because that's what you do. That's human nature. If you're getting stuffed into a concentration camp, you try to fight. You don't just sit there and get carted off to die. But they act like, oh yeah, no, we're different Jews now. We actually fight back, unlike the Jews of the Holocaust, which is just not true. I mean, anybody would fight back if they're being put in that situation, as they should. Does anybody blame the Jews during the Holocaust for rising up and trying to fight back and get out and murder Nazis on the way out? I mean, nobody blames them for that, right? Nobody. But suddenly, Palestinians try to do it, try to break out of their concentration camps, and it's how dare they do this to us? Of course they're going to keep fighting back, and that's going to happen generation after generation.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the Zionist tropes, is that the Jews didn't fight back at all against the Nazis. And there were plenty that did, go to their death because they had no choice, or they felt, they were fighting against an overwhelming power. I mean, Nazi Germany was extremely powerful. There were pockets of resistance, pockets of Jewish resistance who went out fighting. I published an article actually a couple of weeks ago on after October 7th, actually about an uprising that happened on October 7th, 1944 in the Birkenau extermination camp in the Auschwitz complex, in which a bunch of, they're called Sonderkommando, those were the Jews who were forced to operate the gas chambers and crematorium. It's just the most heinous concept possible, but basically were forced to take Jews from the trains who were arriving at Auschwitz and escort them to the gas chambers and then take their bodies and put them in the crematorium. There was a group of them that actually did rise up on October 7th, 1944, and managed to kill several SS men and burn down one of the crematorium and escape. And they were hunted down and murdered by the Nazis. And so they did rise up, and they were killed for it. But no matter what the Jews or anyone else, it wasn't only Jews, but anyone else did in World War II against the Nazi occupation, is not to be judged, whether they went silently to their death or fought back and were killed.
Right.
And the irony, the great irony of all of these Zionists we see online saying, well, we're a different kind of Jew, we fight back. They've become the Nazis. They're the one running these concentration camps. That's what's so incredibly ironic about it.
Yeah. That is what's very incredibly ironic about it. I just can't believe that they're putting these plans out there. And I think at this point, I would hope at this point in the conflict that people would take these types of leaks seriously. Like when these types of plans come out, take them seriously, because in the last year, we've seen them actually come to fruition. We've seen them actually be implemented. People are so quick to dismiss them and say, oh, no, that's just, that was just a plan that was proposed, but nobody's actually really taking that, nobody's really doing that. And then, that's they just said this last week about their whole surrender or starve plan, clearing out the Gazans from the north of Gaza. And then look what they're doing just 1 week later. one week later, they've got the death marches telling people you got to get out, surrender or starve. And that was like some sort of a, well, no, we're not really actually doing that. And here they are doing it just 1 week later. I mean, it's um, do you think they're going to do the same thing to Lebanon? That's now it's looking, I mean, they're using a lot of the same rhetoric, right? They're saying things like there's a vault of cash hiding underneath a hospital, Hezbollah cash that's underneath a vault in a hospital, clearly saying we're about to blow your hospital up. Do you think that, because you were just mentioning that the guy had also a plan for Lebanon, what is the plan for Lebanon that they've actually put out there that we should probably be paying attention to?
Well, you can go back and look at my piece from November of 2023 called, it's something like Top U.S. Military Journal proposes destruction of Lebanon and ethnic cleansing of Gaza, something like that. I'll send it to you, but what they want to do. Here
it is. I got it. It's called Pentagon publishes proposal for ethnic cleansing and colonization of Gaza, destruction of Lebanon. And you wrote this November 21st of last year. Okay.
Right. And it didn't get much attention at the time. But, I think people maybe were just skeptical that something like that could actually happen. But, here we are less than a year later, and that proposal is basically being carried out. Or some version of it. And so I think basically what Israel wants to do in Lebanon is, and what Blinken and Amos Hochstein are trying to do right now, are trying to put extreme pressure on Hezbollah to remove it from the government, so they can collapse the government and put in a collaborator regime in Lebanon, and have Israel occupy southern Lebanon up to the Litani River, and then they would have a collaborator regime, and something like the South Lebanese Army, which was a collaborator regime during the Israeli occupation decades ago. So, what's so I guess revealing to me is I think for a long time, a lot of us were under, myself included, were under the illusion that there is some amount of space between the US and Israel that could be exploited. Like the US doesn't want to go to war with Iran. And it may not, but it's completely supportive of Israel's move. There's nothing it will not defend and will not do. And we see U.S. troops being moved into the region. We see THAAD missile defense being deployed to Israel. So at least whatever deep state operatives are running the Biden administration, they certainly want to push for war. They want to go along with this war against total destruction of Lebanon, and which means, of course, then war against Iran. And so then we have this leak about Israeli plans for war on Iran, for strikes on Iran that could obviously escalate into World War III, that somebody leaked, possibly to prevent that from happening. So maybe there's some voice of sanity, some silent voice of sanity in the Pentagon. I mean, we still don't know what that's actually from, but the powers that be in the Biden administration, and certainly many that are supporting Trump, like Miriam Adelson, who's given $100 million to his campaign, they want war in Iran. So it's a very perilous moment with the election coming, and as Israel is preparing this strike on Iran.
So where did you say in Lebanon they're going to be taking land up until where? What part? Where you said some river? Which river? I'm just looking at a map.
Yeah, there's a river.
I'm just trying to figure out how much.
It's called the Litani River. It's basically the Litani River runs basically east-west, flows into the Mediterranean Sea, and this is what Israel has long coveted as land that it wants to colonize and build settlements. And this is, it's
so they're wanting to take, I mean, that's like all the way almost up parallel to Damascus. I mean, you're talking about taking like a giant, like a third of Lebanon potentially.
Yeah, it's a large swath of Lebanon, and yes, the Israelis want to occupy it. They want to. I mean, this is where Hezbollah is at its strongest militarily.
Hmm.
So, but I mean, realistically, when you look at what Israel has been able to do in Lebanon so far, I mean, they're destroying swaths of Beirut from the air. And, you know, we just saw them take out a huge residential complex today, like they've been doing in Gaza for years. But in terms of
Yeah,
the ground operations going into southern Lebanon, they really have not gone they haven't been able to go very far because of very stiff resistance from Hezbollah, which has prepared for this for years and years
right.
and years. And they're a very advanced military that has a lot of experience from its years fighting in Syria alongside the Syrian army and the Russian military, fighting interoperably with them. So as much as they took some hits early on with the pager explosions and the killing of their leadership, because clearly they had been infiltrated or compromised at some level, which allowed that to
Hmm.
happen, their fighting force is still very, very capable. They sent a drone to hit Netanyahu's house, to assassinate Netanyahu, and they hit his bedroom
Yeah,
window. They've sent drones to hit a Golani Brigade base a little bit north of Tel Aviv. So they're much more militarily capable and have a much bigger arsenal and haven't even used their full arsenal. So I think Israel is basically looking at its kind of pipe dreams about occupying Lebanon, especially as Iran is very powerful and we're basically going to see if Israel strikes back. Iran has said that they will strike back much harder, and we know that Israel, it's a much smaller country. Its critical infrastructure is not that hard to really take out if Iran wanted to, and it would. What they've said is it would only take really a couple hundred missiles, and we saw
yeah,
how in this last Iranian attack, how those missiles were able to easily penetrate and overwhelm Israeli air defenses. And if they really send, if they have a carefully planned operation, which no doubt they will, they'll overwhelm the American air defenses that have been sent out too.
yeah.
So, I mean, I don't see this going as Israel imagines it, but a lot of
Well, we'll see.
a lot of human lives are at risk
Right.
here.
Right. And that's what we'll see. I can see the Litani River. It goes like Golan Heights. So it would basically be cutting a line from the top of Golan Heights all the way to the sea. I could see why they would want to take that land. What's interesting, though, is, of course, they would say, because then it would kind of connect more Golan Heights and Israel, it'd be more of a one contiguous area, I guess. But, I think the big point, they always say it's for our security, right? We need to expand and grab more land for our security. That's what they said with Golan Heights. We got to take the Golan Heights for our security. We got to take southern Lebanon for our security. We have to take Gaza for our security. We need the West Bank for our security. And it's because we can't allow October 7th to ever happen again, right? Is the thinking, or at least what they say nowadays. They didn't have that to say before last October 7th. But it's like, look, you keep moving your borders, your enemy is still on your border. I mean, you could keep moving it, but the people are still there. So there's no logic there. That's not the real reason. They're just trying to take land. It's not about security at all. So, this is just a land grab. And they've made that, I mean, it's so clear more and more. There was even articles that have recently come out in the Times of Israel saying the reason why, is Lebanon part of the promised land? So this is why we can take Lebanon, because God said that this is our land too. It's, they're just already sowing the seeds and paving the way for people to say, yeah, all right, let's go take it. It's ours now because God said it's ours. I mean, this is just
Right. Yeah, I mean, you have like half, I don't know, roughly half of Israeli society who's like, well, we can't return to the north of Israel, the Galilee, if there's Hezbollah just on the other side of the border, because they could attack us. So we have to go in there and defeat them for that reason. And then the other half is saying, what are you talking about? I mean, yes, but we actually want to build settlements in that region, in that land. And so if you build settlements there, well, then you need military there, of course, to protect them.
Right,
and if you have
right.
people there, well, then you have to have the next piece of land. You have to secure that too. And if you want to secure that, the logic they use is if you want to secure that, you have to put settlers there because military will withdraw. Settlers are
Yeah.
permanent. And so it's a never ending logic that it's
Right.
like, well, where does
Right.
this stop? It doesn't.
We have a map here of the Litani rivers just so that people can kind of see this. This right here. So the blue line that cuts straight across, there's that point there in the gray land, which is Israel. The yellow represents Lebanon. That point where the river cuts across, that's actually Golan Heights. So I could see why they want to take that little square at the bottom from Golan Heights over to the sea from that Litani River. You can really see where they would want to try to grab that land and take more of that for them. And then it's like, what? Hezbollah still on the other side of that line. So, I mean, it doesn't make any sense. It's just an expansionist project. Dan, thank you so much for being here and for exposing this, helping expose this plan that they have of these concentration camps. We do have the link down below for the article. People can read that themselves. But Dan Cohen, thank you so much for being here. Independent journalist, filmmaker, founder of Uncaptured Media. Thank you again for being here. Thank you for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you so much for watching. This was just a clip from the longer, larger show that you can catch Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern at KimIversonShow.com. That'll route you to the platform where you need to be in order to get the full uncensored show every Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. Click on that link, watch the full interview. See you there.